Well, my hair is getting all over the damn place. It is too long for my liking, even though it's probably too short for some of you plebeians out there. But you know who else's hair probably gets too long? Werewolves. Hello, everyone. Britton here, also known as Smoke Dude, and I'm back here today to talk about Mongrels, which is Stephen Graham Jones's characteristically offbeat take on the werewolf genre. Not really much else for me to say aside from what I'm going to say in the reviews, so let's get into it. After The Only Good Indians, I knew I definitely had to keep my eye on Stephen Graham Jones. His unique voice, his social commentary, and oddball combination of literary and genre tropes was definitely something I wanted to keep consuming. And given my longtime affinity for werewolves, a lot of my friends and people I know pointed me to Mongrels, which is as my next read for Jones, which is, as I mentioned, kind of his take on the werewolf mythos. Particularly, my friend Edward Lorne, if I recall correctly, actually said that Mongrels was the most human werewolf novel he had ever read. Granted, I was intrigued. Mongrels isn't really a horror novel. I mean, it definitely has horrific moments, for sure, like that part with the wolf dogs, if you know, you know, which... But Mongrels' literary predecessor isn't Stephen King so much, it's actually Alan Moore, who Jones actually thanks in the acknowledgments in Mongrels. And Mongrels is to werewolves what Moore's seminal work, Watchmen, is to superheroes, as Jones actually imagines what it would be like if werewolves actually existed in our world. And much of the exploration of this book really goes into what it would be like if werewolves were indeed real. Now, that might sound a bit dry and boring to some people, but believe it or not, it's actually not. Jones consistently finds ways to keep the mythos that he builds here very interesting. And I'm unsure if Jones is quite as jaded as Moore is nowadays, but he definitely shares Moore's deep probing thought into the subject that he tackles here. And what he creates is a fascinating work. And one of the things I appreciate about Mongrels is that Jones never stoops to werewolf cliches either. There's no mass killings, there's no hunters attempting to eliminate our heroes, for lack of a better word. I don't know what you would call it, the protagonists. We'll just say they're the protagonists. No evil werewolves who are attacking our werewolves. There's no stupid romances. There's nothing like that. There's no, like, smut stuff. Mongrels is more of a character study and a slow, might I dare say mundane, look into a group of people who don't really have a home anywhere and are never really able to find a place that they can call their own. Jones builds pathos with his characters, particularly in how he explores identity with our main character, who he never actually names. We don't actually learn the name of our main character in this story. Now, he may have an unconventional upbringing, to say the least, but he still wants the same things that every person wants, that being connection and finding out who he will be as a person. Particularly moving, I thought, in this book was our narrator's first encounter with romance. Now, I know I said earlier that there's no, like, dumb romance stuff in here, but there's actually a really interesting, or very good, romantic sequence that takes place, I think, somewhere in the middle of the book, which, for my money, might be the best piece of writing that I've read from Jones so far. Like, it is genuinely masterful, deeply moving stuff. And our narrator's uncle and aunt, I know the uncle's name is Darren. I can't remember his aunt's name. Let me think. Libby is her name. Thank you. I just saw it on the back here. So I always think of Lost when I hear that name because, you know, she was with Hurley for a while, the Libby in that show. But not here. The other, and Darren, of course, reminds me of my old pastor. But anyway, one of the things I also really like is that the aunt and uncle characters, Darren and Lily, they're not dreaded creatures of the night, but rather tired, emotionally lost people who don't really know how to give a normal life to our narrator because they've never really lived a normal existence, and they don't even try for that matter. They just are like, well, I guess we're going to have to take care of this kid the best we can, even though we have this affliction, if you will. But they do love each other, and they love our main character as well. They try to provide him with some kind of guidance and wisdom before he heads off on his own, as parental figures try to do. And there's also a very intense focus on loneliness, as these characters also prove to be just as unmoored and unsure what to do with themselves as our main character. And, but I do find that at its core, Mongrels is a coming-of-age story and growing up as an outsider in a culture that isn't really understood or even wanted in society, for that matter. Our main character, as I mentioned before, he doesn't really know who he is or what he's going to be with his life, despite making up all sorts of identities for himself, which not only makes this book interesting on a thematic level, but also on a prose level as well. It doesn't help that his family's unique situation makes it practically impossible for him to have a normal life or to form the connections that he should at his age, but he also faces growing up in a culture that's slowly dying off. Ironically enough, he isn't able to turn into a werewolf himself, despite an immense desire to. It can be particularly poignant for some readers in how it can be applied to our world. I can definitely see Jones pulling from his own background as a Blackfoot Native American, which is another community that has been forgotten and downright ignored by, mainstream society. Now, he never really bashes your head over. He never really bashes you over the head with this commentary, like say Gabino Iglesias might. But I do think it adds to the flavor of the book and really gives it more depth and nuance than you would expect. Even if people don't quite notice it at first, if you don't, like to sniff out themes like I do. No pun intended. I think the best part of Mongrels, though, as it was in The Only Good Indians, is the voice and tone that Jones uses. I mean, the prose of Mongrels is just absolutely immaculate. It's gritty, hard-bitten, again, no pun intended, sometimes gorgeous. I'm 2 novels in on Jones, and I can see clearly that the guy is a stylist. Great stylists immerse you into the setting they create completely, and that's precisely what Jones does here in Mongrels. The atmosphere here is tangible. You can see, hear, smell, and taste the often squalid places that our main characters live in. And the nicest thing about this book is that Jones keeps this tone consistent. He doesn't fall into the trap of other werewolf books like Those Across the River, which starts brilliantly as an atmospheric, mysterious horror novel, and then it just becomes kind of a goofy comedy of errors by the end, I should say, with a pretty half-assed attempt at pathos. In Mongrels, though, every part of this book feels meticulously constructed to explore the themes and characters here, and nothing feels cheap. There were a few problems in Mongrels that kept me from saying that this is a great book as well as just saying it's a very good one. One is that Mongrels doesn't really have much in ways of a plot. Like I said, it's more of a character study of these eccentric group of misfits. Yet there was a part of me that was waiting for something to happen. There were definitely parts where I was like, okay, where's this book going to go? But it didn't really. Now, fortunately, I think Jones keeps I don't think. Jones definitely keeps his focus on the characters and their struggles. And they're definitely compelling and sympathetic enough to carry the novel without there being an moving plot that, keeps you engaged. It engages in different ways. But the other big problem I felt with this book that really bothered me is that this novel, it kind of just stops. It doesn't really give us an ending in a proper sense. It just kind of ends. It just kind of stops. Which, to some who might enjoy Mongrels, there might be some who would say that it's fitting, considering that it is more of a character study than a horror romp. But I do remember, nonetheless, feeling underwhelmed, if you will, with the ending. I hope it's not a trend with Jones, because I also remember feeling the same way with The Only Good Indians. It also kind of ended in a manner that I thought was unsatisfactory, in a way I couldn't really place my fingers on. Even though it has more of a traditional ending than Mongrels does, for that matter. But like the Only Good Indians, though, Mongrels is sometimes brilliant, it's sometimes frustrating, it's often fascinating. It takes something that is very old, such as the werewolf, that's old and tired, like the werewolf, and gives it new life in a way that is really fascinating. I know that Stephen Graham Jones has said in the past, because I've watched interviews with him, I know he has said in the past that he can't really write something unless he believes it. And you can really tell that he really put in the work, kind of what I was saying earlier, that he really put in the work and thought to make this feel somewhat plausible. Even to details on like how the characters eat when they're in their werewolf forms as based in when they're in their human form. But it's also a novel that stuck with me, kind of like Only Good Indians, and in a way that it hasn't really left my mind. I mean, it definitely feels like a deeply personal work from Jones, one that he pulled from deep within himself, and I know that this is somewhat autobiographical because, kind of like the characters in this, he also kind of grew up in an impoverished situation. So I can definitely see this being kind of a book from deep within Stephen Graham Jones's heart. But I suppose that's what all artists of any kind do at the end of the day, is kind of pull something deep from themselves to create something for us to enjoy. But Stephen Graham Jones continues to show himself as a talented and very unique author with a finely tuned voice and style that keeps me engaged throughout his work. Yet I am left somewhat frustrated. I know that a great novel is inside of him, and I am curious to see if he'll be able to do one, or which one that will be, since he has written quite a bit, and hopefully in one of his many books, I will find the great novel from him that I seek. I wouldn't say that Mongrels is quite that novel, but for what it's worth, it's a very, very good one, and one that I recommend. I do think this book is worth the read. Even if it isn't a very conventional experience, it definitely wasn't for me. It definitely wasn't what I expected it would be. But, yeah, that's kind of all I have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, you can find me on social media. You can find me on Twitter. You can also find me on Goodreads and Letterboxd, where I write reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. You can also find me on Instagram and Blue Sky. I'm starting to get the hang of Blue Sky, but hopefully you guys enjoyed. Like I said before, like, subscribe, comment. As my friend John Minton likes to say, it feels good when you do it. So, yeah, not really much else for me to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys later. Bye-bye.